Saluton from BA. This is a Rorschach Multilateral update from the 19th of November 2024. A summary of what's going down in the world's major multilateral institutions. To start this week, NATO scrambled fighter jets from Poland and Romania to Ukraine's borders following a significant missile attack by Russia on Ukraine's energy infrastructure on Sunday the 17th. The strikes targeted thermal power plants and led to emergency power cuts in several large cities. Ukraine's air defenses intercepted drones over Kiev, while NATO jets responded to missiles heading west. Poland heightened its air defense readiness amidst the escalation, demonstrating NATO support amid Russia's intensified aggression. The recent Russian attacks on Ukraine were some of the most intense since the war began, and followed an unusual call between German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Russian President Putin focused on ending hostilities. More about the war, as on Friday the 15th, EU officials raised concerns about reports of a Chinese factory producing drones for Russia, potentially aiding its war efforts in Ukraine. Diplomats hinted at possible sanctions similar to those imposed on Iran, if evidence confirms the transferring of weapons from China to Russia. The development reflects growing tensions, with some European leaders urging stricter policies on China following recent geopolitical shifts. The EU is in a difficult position with China as they are deeply connected through trade. This connection would make any practical sanctions to limit Chinese assistance to Russia's war effort difficult to enact without serious consequences within the EU. Speaking of Ukraine, the country condemned a statement made by an official from the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, in the Russia-Africa Forum in Sochi on Wednesday the 13th. The official accused Ukraine of committing genocide in Donbas and destabilizing the Sahel region. Ukraine dismissed these remarks as baseless propaganda aligning with Russian narratives and urged the ECOWAS leadership to disavow what was said, emphasizing respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. This incident reflects broader geopolitical tensions amid ongoing global conflicts, especially as the Russian government is attempting to bring African nations closer politically. In some updates from Africa, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was honored with Nigeria's Grand Commander of the Order of the Niger, becoming only the second foreign dignitary to receive this distinction. During his visit on Sunday the 17th, Modi highlighted Nigeria's entry into BRICS and their joint support for the African Union's G20 membership, calling it a historic milestone. He expressed gratitude for the recognition, viewing it as a tribute to India's 1.4 billion citizens and the enduring ties between the two nations. India is a country of rapidly growing importance geopolitically, especially as Modi has made an effort to build diplomatic ties across nations and continents. In other news, the UN Security Council's elected members proposed a resolution demanding an immediate, unconditional, and permanent ceasefire in Gaza on Thursday the 14th. The resolution also calls for the release of hostages from Hamas's October 2023 attacks and guarantees of humanitarian aid for Gaza's population. While the resolution highlights urgent needs like food and healthcare access, its adoption depends heavily on US support. The US has historically been hesitant about giving Gaza recognition or aid through the UN, primarily due to the strength of the American relationship with Israel. Next up, the Climate Change Conference in Azerbaijan, COP29, is happening this week. At the conference on Wednesday the 13th, Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, addressed the challenges faced by small island developing states in relation to climate change. He criticized major emitters, noting that G20 nations contribute 80% of global emissions and that these vulnerable islands endure severe consequences like rising seas and extreme storms. Guterres urged greater global accountability to support these nations, highlighting their minimal role in creating the climate catastrophe yet bearing its brunt. This year's COP summit faced criticism for taking place in Azerbaijan, which is a massive exporter of energy types that scientists now lead to increased carbon emissions and climate change. Other criticisms of the summit include that Azerbaijan is a dictatorship that silences activists, including climate activists. Speaking of the COP29, the International Organization for Migration and UNICEF renewed their partnership to protect and empower children displaced by climate change. This 4-year collaboration aims to address the intersection of climate change, migration, and child rights. Heading to Asia, the Philippine government indicated it would not oppose former President Duterte's possible surrender to the International Criminal Court, or ICC, for its investigation into his drug war. Duterte welcomed the investigation and challenged the ICC to act swiftly on Wednesday the 13th. This marks a shift from President Marcos's previous stance of refusing ICC cooperation, highlighting a growing political rift with Duterte's family. The ICC is examining allegations of crimes against humanity linked to Duterte's anti-narcotics campaign, which led to thousands of deaths. The campaign was marked as particularly brutal and targeted some individuals with limited evidence of actual involvement in the drug trade. The International Monetary Fund, or IMF, held unscheduled talks with Pakistani officials on economic policy and reforms on Friday the 15th. The meeting, aimed at addressing vulnerabilities, comes shortly after Pakistan's approval for a $7 billion bailout. While the first review of the IMF's extended fund facility will occur in early 2025, the IMF expressed optimism about Pakistan's commitment to reforms. On another note, a regional seminar organized by the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, or OSCE, from Thursday the 14th through Friday the 15th, brought together representatives from 5 Central Asian countries to discuss green energy transition. Hosted by Turkmenistan's State Energy Institute, the event focused on integrating renewable energy sources, developing green technologies, and reducing carbon footprints. On to the Americas, the Secretary General of the Organization of American States met with relatives of Israeli hostages taken by Hamas during the attacks last year. According to a press release from Thursday the 14th, he reiterated the necessity of the hostages' release to end the war and restore peace. He emphasized that Hamas is responsible for prolonging the conflict, and their refusal to release the hostages contributes to the suffering of innocent civilians. The Pan American Health Organization, or PAHO, reported that over 5,000 people in the Caribbean die annually from HIV-related causes, with 1/3 diagnosed at an advanced stage. The PAHO revealed on Wednesday the 13th that the region has not met the majority of its targets for HIV treatment. Projections from within PAHO indicate that the Caribbean is unlikely to meet most of the targets it set for itself to reduce the impact of the disease in the near future. In more health news, the World Health Organization, or WHO, and its partners launched a day of action for cervical cancer elimination on Sunday the 17th, marking 4 years since the global strategy's initiation. Hundreds of countries have introduced the HPV vaccine, which can reduce rates of cervical cancer, while others are expanding screening and surgical care. In Peru, the Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization emphasized the need for a radical transformation in food production and consumption to address food loss and secure clean energy for agri-food systems at a conference on Thursday the 14th. He highlighted the staggering global costs of food waste and the need for innovation, technology, and investment. On the same day, World Trade Organization members held a session on the challenges faced by landlocked developing countries. Discussions centered on improving trade infrastructure, digital connectivity, and trade facilitation to better integrate these countries into global markets. And that's it for this week. Thank you for joining us. Before we leave, did you know that if you are listening to us on Spotify, you can leave comments or questions in the episode? There's a comment box right there. The comments are private by default, and we won't publish them. If you want us to get back to you, share your email so we can contact you back. Put something in there. Go crazy. We'd love to hear from you. See you next week.